In the year 15, a Roman army marched back into the Teutoburg forest. What they found stopped even hardened soldiers in their tracks. Scattered across miles of bog and woodland were the bleached bones of thousands of Roman soldiers. They lay exactly where they had fallen 6 years earlier, weathered by rain and frost. Skulls were nailed to tree trunks, standing over the wreckage of shattered armor and corroded sword blades. We know the details of this scene because the historian Tacitus recorded the accounts of the men who walked through this graveyard. This diagram shows the scale of the destruction. 3 full Roman legions, up to 20,000 men, had been annihilated so completely that it remains one of the greatest military defeats in the history of the empire. This was an inside job. The man who orchestrated the slaughter was a trusted commander raised and trained within the Roman military machine itself. Arminius was born around 18 BCE, a prince of the Cheruscan tribe who was sent to Rome as a young child. Rome's imperial system used the sons of tribal nobility as diplomatic insurance. By educating these boys in the capital, the empire ensured their father's loyalty and prepared the next generation of leaders to serve as Roman-style proxy rulers on the frontier. Arminius spent his youth immersed in Roman doctrine. He learned fluent Latin, fought in imperial campaigns, and eventually rose to command Germanic auxiliary troops. By his mid-20s, he had integrated into the highest tiers of provincial society. He was granted full Roman citizenship and the equestrian rank, a prestigious standing reserved for those the empire considered culturally and politically absorbed. By educating Arminius, Rome provided a brilliant captive with the exact tactical knowledge required to dismantle its legions from the inside. When Arminius returned to Germania, he was assigned as a senior advisor to Publius Quintilius Varus, the Roman governor tasked with transforming the frontier into a permanent province. Varus approached the volatile region as if it were already conquered. He imposed heavy taxation and rigid legal codes on tribal leaders who had never actually accepted Roman rule. Arminius used his position to move easily within Varus's inner circle. While serving the governor by day, he spent his nights secretly uniting rival Germanic factions into an unprecedented underground resistance. The betrayal was almost stopped. Arminius's own father-in-law, Sergestus, warned the governor of the plot. But Varus, blinded by his absolute trust in a Roman-trained officer, dismissed the warning as a personal tribal feud. The disaster in the forest was a failure of imperial intelligence. Varus had mistaken a brilliant strategist for a loyal subject. In September of the year 9, Arminius convinced Varus to divert his legions into unfamiliar, dense forest to suppress a fabricated rebellion. At Calcrisae, the heavy Roman column was funneled into a miles-long narrow path between a hill and a bog, flanked by hidden Germanic ramparts. The terrain stripped the legions of their ability to form the tight defensive squares they relied on. As Arminius abandoned the column to join the ambush, the Germanic coalition attacked the flanks of the thinned Roman line. Over several days of running combat, the 3 legions were systematically cut apart. The defeat permanently ended Rome's attempt to colonize territory east of the Rhine River. When word reached the capital, Emperor Augustus reportedly banged his head against a doorframe, crying out for Varus to return his lost legions. On the battlefield, Varus had already died by suicide. Arminius had weaponized Rome's absolute trust to destroy its northern expansion in a single stroke of strategic genius. Rome's immediate response was a series of brutal, punitive campaigns led by General Germanicus. Between 14 and 16, Roman armies crossed the Rhine to burn villages and reclaim the lost eagle standards. In the year 15, Arminius suffered a personal blow. His pregnant wife, Thusnelda, was captured and handed over to the Romans by her own father, the loyalist Sergestus. Thusnelda was taken to the capital and paraded through the streets in Germanicus's military triumph, a war trophy displayed before the Roman crowds. She gave birth to a son, Tumellus, in captivity. The boy grew up inside the empire his father had fought to expel, and according to Tacitus, he likely ended his life in a gladiatorial arena. Arminius successfully liberated his land, yet the empire managed to swallow his entire family, keeping his wife and son forever out of his reach. Once the external threat of Rome receded, the fragile alliance of tribes immediately fractured, reverting to old regional and dynastic rivalries. Arminius found himself locked in a civil war with a rival king, Marbod. The chieftain who had defeated the legions could not unite his own people in peacetime. In the year 21, his own relatives turned on him. They accused Arminius of seeking absolute royal power, a concept that violated tribal traditions of shared leadership. At the age of 37, Arminius was assassinated by his own kinsmen. He was murdered by the very people whose independence he had secured. His story remained a footnote for 15 centuries until humanist scholars rediscovered the writings of Tacitus. They recast the ancient chieftain as Hermann, a foundational hero for a 19th century Germany seeking national unification. The qualities that saved Germania, his centralized ambition and Roman-style vision, were the same traits that made him a target for his own people. He defeated the empire, only to be destroyed by the independence he created.